Hello and welcome to a special Sunday afternoon edition of the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest in this episode will be David Sisk, who is our basketball recruiting analyst. This episode is presented by the Well Coffee House, a Nashville area coffee house providing fresh roasted coffee along with house-made pastries, breakfast and lunch offerings. There are 4 locations to serve you in the Nashville area. Those are Brentwood, Green Hills, downtown, and Bellevue. More information can be found at wellcoffeehouse.org. The Well Coffee House, where coffee changes lives. We thank our co-presenting sponsor, Wellspire, Nashville's Learning and Development Center, which is located in the Gulch. Today's news is sponsored by Sutherland and Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. Sutherland and Belk can help you if you have been hurt in an accident. Please call Taylor or Russell at 615-846-6200 to determine your rights and if they can help. Well, we thought we would have news on Kerwin Walton by now. The Minnesota point guard is supposed to be choosing this weekend Vanderbilt among 6 finalists. We have done this podcast with the expectation that Kerwin Walton lands somewhere other than Vanderbilt. If that changes, we, of course, will keep you updated at vandysports.com and also maybe have a separate podcast to talk about that. David Sisk appears on our guest line, which is brought to you by Boll and Branch. That was started by Vanderbilt graduates Scott and Missy Tannen. I had no clue how comfortable Boll and Branch sheets would be until I got them. They are fair trade certified, meaning they are made under safe conditions by men and women treated and paid fairly. Try them free for a month. You can return them, but you won't want to. Once you get the sheets, try the mattress. That was voted the best mattress of 2018. Go to bollandbranch.com. That is spelled B-O-L-L. Enter the promo code Vandy and get $50 off your first set of sheets. David Sisk is joining us. He is our basketball recruiting analyst at vandysports.com. David, thank you for doing this. We are doing this on a Sunday afternoon. This is a podcast you and I both wanted to do a few days ago, but things keep changing with Vandy a little bit here and there. Life has gotten busy on my end a little bit, so this is the first time that we could get together where it made sense. So thank you for joining us today.
And it's one of those cloudy days where it's 50 degrees outside, so I think everything worked out pretty well.
I know. It's very unspring-like out there. And, of course, with the virus, not a lot of places to go. But that doesn't stop us from having things to talk about, and there is a lot to discuss on this podcast today as it pertains to Vanderbilt basketball and recruitment. Let's start
Chris,
here.
By the way, I was looking forward to getting my hair cut tomorrow. And that got put off.
Yeah, I'm going on 7.5 weeks. Fortunately, the one that I got last time was a good one, so I'm just going to wait for the barber to open up.
Do you
again.
remember Kid and Play?
Yes.
Back in the day. Every time I put a visor on, I've got a high fade. That's what I look like.
I need a picture of this.
You could, if you've got anybody's got a garden, I'll send it to you, and you can. Or you're a farmer and you can keep the crows away this summer. You put it out in the field.
Perfect. Maybe I can scare my kids with it. They might need that right now after the day we're having. Well, on to hoops for a minute. You and I are doing this podcast. Again, this is Sunday afternoon. We scheduled this for today because we thought, well, I say we scheduled this for today. We were hoping to do this Saturday, because that's when Kerwin Walton was going to announce. We put it back to Sunday, hoping we would hear something. By this point, this is 1:30 on a Sunday afternoon. Kerwin Walton still has not announced. We are, for the purposes of this podcast, assuming it is not going to be Vanderbilt. If it is, we may have to have another one on short notice. But you suspect it is going to be either Minnesota or North Carolina. Is that correct?
That is speculation on my part. Maybe, I don't know. It just kind of, everything I'm hearing kind of maybe leaning that way. But I'm going to say this. I think everything is speculation. I don't think there's one person in America who knows what's going to happen, including Kerwin Walton. And that doesn't sound good. but I believe that he went all the way through yesterday, and one of two things either happened. Either he did not know what he was going to decide. He went to bed not knowing where he was going to go, or he made a late switch and he didn't have his graphics or his signing video ready. And that may sound crazy, and it wouldn't have happened 10, 20 years ago. But in today's day and age, I'll give you an example that'll hit home with Vanderbilt. When Semi Shatu, let's go back to that one. If you'll remember, Chris, we knew before early signing period was over, 2017, 18, whatever year that was, that he was going to Vanderbilt, but he had actually sent in the paperwork to Vanderbilt and had already committed, had already signed, but it was a silent, not even a silent commitment, it was a silent signing. Vanderbilt had the paperwork. Here, he thought we were crazy publicly. He had officially, but not publicly, and everybody thought we were crazy. If you remember, Chris, everybody was like, "You don't know what you're talking about. What's happening here? You got that one wrong." We both kind of called it, and we knew that Bryce Drew had the signature in hand, but he wanted to wait till he could make a video with all his family members present, because he was in Vermont or wherever his school was at, New England, and he had parents in Canada, and they had to wait till Thanksgiving when they got together so they could kind of get together and do it. And then I think they had a monkey wrench thrown in that one. So at the end of November, about 2 weeks after the national signing period began, and a couple of days after it's over, he made his announcement. People were saying, how can he do it now? But Vanderbilt already had the paperwork. So those kind of things happen. And, if Kerwin changed his mind Thursday or Friday, it takes a while to get these things done. And if he does know he's changed his mind, maybe he's just waiting on to get a video completed. So, there's a lot of scenarios that it could be, but I've said this all along. He has 5 future cast on the Rivals Network, and 4 of those are North Carolina. And basically all 4 of those guys, I've spoken to all of them. We all saw the story that we ran earlier in the week, and they're all kind of like, hey, we're as uncertain about this as any prediction we've ever made. And I know Eric Bossie's and Corey Evans have said that. And I think if they were uncertain on Thursday, they're really uncertain on Sunday, a day after he was supposed to announce.
I think back to the Semi Shatu ordeal, and you're right. For 3 weeks, we were told that info and confidence said you can't use it, but here's the deal. And trying to answer questions on the board every day about, look, this is nothing to worry about. And, is it an academic thing? No. Well, is it this? No. Well, then why do you tell me not to worry? Just trust me on this one, okay? I mean, playing that game every day for 3 weeks was lots of fun. And number 2, I look back on that, and I cannot think of a more appropriate commitment video given what happened in the 14 people in his ear throughout his Vanderbilt career, which is really why things kind of came apart at the seams with that whole situation. Was his agent in
that video?
Oh, I don't know.
Was his agent in that video?
Probably. I mean, everybody with the Village people was in that video, I think.
This is for Vanderbilt fans, and I think we could say it now, and I wouldn't have dared breathed it a year ago, but I'll go ahead and say it now, because we got Vanderbilt fans listening, and obviously they like to hear stories, and so a lot of them don't even know what we talked about, the commitment, the video commitment. But I'll tell you something else. But I know that they want to be entertained, and they want to hear good stuff and make it worth their listen. I think it will. I ended up being told by somebody, I'm not going to mention the name, but it was somebody inside the program that the agent ended up telling Semi during the SEC season, "Hey, quit playing defense because his basically his right hand man. I don't know if you call it a handler, if you call it basically just somebody giving him advice, a mentor, or whatever, but it was an agent." And he said, "Look, you've got to quit playing defense because if you play defense, you're going to get in foul trouble. If you're in foul trouble, you're not on the floor, and the NBA scout can't see you." So, hey, there's my story for the day. Story time with David Sisk.
And yet he stayed out of foul trouble, and NBA scouts saw plenty of him and chose to pass.
And stayed out of the draft also.
Right, and I don't think the G League went very well for him either. I don't mean to make fun of the kid. It just, people's lives aside, it was sort of a comical situation in hindsight.
Was he the most unpopular player to ever play at Vanderbilt?
Maybe. Boy, that would be close. I can't think of who else.
I know you're running your top 100 right now. You might have your top negative 100. Gosh, I tell you what.
I'm sorry, I'm losing you a little bit, I think, because of the signal, or maybe it's my connection, but either way.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's
where do
okay.
I need to start?
No, that's okay. We'll just continue from where we are. He would rank very high on the unpopular list. I think if you had to pair a coach and a player and pick one of each, I think Richard Schmidt would be the most unpopular coach, although that would predate my time covering the program, which started in 2003. But I think as an unpopular player, I think he would be the top pick.
I don't even remember Richard Schmidt, and it's odd that his name came up because I've got a friend of mine who's a college coach, and I know we're rambling here. I am a little bit, but I think Vanderbilt fans would be interested. I think it's all subjects of interest to them. But I got a call on Friday, and an old buddy of mine, it's a college coach, and he's in Florida, and he was talking about the Tampa job coming up and how he might come up open, and how he needs how he would handle it in social media and all that, how to promote himself and different things. And he said the coach over there now is nearly 80 years old. And I said, "Well, who is it?" And he said, "Oh, Richard Schmidt. He used to coach at Vanderbilt." And I'm sitting here scratching my head, and I'm 53, and I followed Vanderbilt. Gosh, I can go back to, back into the early 80s, late 70s, and for whatever reason, I just can't remember that name. I didn't know there was I can remember back to Sam Newton and trying to go a little bit farther, and that name kind of escaped me. So, like you said, it wasn't one of the great moments of Vanderbilt history.
No, here's the background for people on Richard Schmidt. Richard Schmidt took over after they fired Wayne Dobbs. Wayne Dobbs had just won SEC Coach of the Year, and there was an off-court matter that got him fired. And Richard Schmidt was named the next head coach. Richard Schmidt had been the coach at Ballard High in Louisville, which produces a good number of players. And Schmidt brought with him two Louisville kids, Al Miller and Jimmy Gray. Al Miller would have been a McDonald's, well, I don't think he was a McDonald's All-American because the game was around at that time, but I think he probably would have been one of the best guys maybe that didn't play in that game, but they were two very highly regarded recruits from Louisville. So what Richard Schmidt did, he also signed Jeff Turner in there too. And Schmidt came in, they had Charles Davis and Mike Rhodes and some other holdovers, and he was one of those, I'm going to do this with my guys.
Mike Rhodes' his senior season.
That is correct. And Charles Davis too. And I remember my dad was not like an angry person. My dad's still alive, by the way. But I remember we would listen to games on the radio because that's where probably 85% of them where you caught them. You couldn't see them on TV. And we didn't have season tickets at the time. So I just remember every time we would listen on the radio and they would do starting lineups. And every time he started with Rhodes and Davis on the bench, my dad just wanted to lose his mind. So that's my memory of Richard Schmidt. And I think that's a lot of other folks as well. But Schmidt lasted, I think, 2 years and then they got rid of him and brought in Cian Newton. It might have been 3, but I want to say 2.
Is that not crazy? I mean, I know ever how long it's been. It's 2020 now. If you said the phrase town and country, I would have known exactly what you're talking about in 40 years later, and neither one of those guys start.
I know. I think, it frustrated everybody at the time. So, and it
I
wasn't
see
like they
Mike
had
Rhodes a lot. He still lives over in Linden, and you go to a Perry County basketball game, he'll be there. So he still makes his way up to a couple of Vanderbilt games a year. So I still see him around.
Well, I would say a lot of people are envious. I think a lot of Vanderbilt people would like to forget Richard Schmidt, and you have in your own way.
I did. You got that right.
I'm looking this up as we go. He was at Vanderbilt, yes, for 2 years. They were 28 and 27 overall, and 7 and 11 both years in the SEC. And then they moved on after 2 years.
That sounds pretty good if you look at the last 3 years.
Yeah, well, moving on from a coach in 2 years too is also a very un-Vanderbilt thing to do. So the fact that they jettisoned Richard Schmidt after 2 years tells you about how unhappy folks were at the time. But let's move on to Vanderbilt currently, I should say. The Odusipe commitment. David, break that one down for us, please.
A player that they had seen last spring and summer with Bobby Mays Elite on the Under Armour Association circuit. They liked. They went and saw him in the D2 private school state tournament at Lipscomb. He had a really good weekend against Christian Brothers, and I think the other one was, I might have to look if it was Evangelical or who it was, but had a good double-double both games, protected the rim. Kennedy Chandler was one of the top 10 players in 2021. Was on one of those teams that he beat or that they defeated rather, and they liked him, and it kind of picked up. And the hold up was if he was going to be accepted by admissions, and I spoke with Bobby Mays 2 weeks ago from today, would have been on a Sunday, after the offer was made, and I don't know if it was a slip or what, but I've never had anybody so blunt. He said if he's accepted, he's going to Vanderbilt, and kind of stopped, and I just don't know if it was a quick sentence or he said something he didn't mean to, but I called. I think I'll let you know. I'll let Corey Evans know, and Corey had put the first future cast for him to Vanderbilt, and Corey's had already talked to him, and he said, yep, he told me the same thing. So we were kind of just waiting, knew it was going to happen. I was trying to keep close tabs, and if he got accepted, we knew the deal was going to go down, and it did pretty quickly, and he's the newest Commodore. I hear everything between 6'7" to 6'9" on his height. And obviously, the closer he is to 6'9" as a center, the better it's going to be. Rim protector, a lot of length, 7-foot wingspan, plays with a high motor, plays hard, rebounder, can run the floor very well. He's good in the pick and roll, has good hands. He's just got to – I think his thing, and they'll tell you the thing he's got to do, he's got to develop his game away from the bucket. He's pretty decent around the bucket with his back there. He can play that style. But as we said, obviously, if you look at his strengths in the SEC, if he's 6'7", there could be some struggles. If he's 6'9", then he could end up having a good career. I mean, he's not going to come in and dominate as a freshman. But you know, I begin to think that all post players anyway, Chris, in today's game, you know, they're not like guards. Guards can come in ready to go. You see very few freshmen post players, and you'll see some, but you see very few just ready to get after it when they get on campus. And their game has to improve, and they have to develop. And he's going to be like the rest of them. He's no different, but I think he has some qualities that fans will like.
The comparison that comes to mind to me is James Siakam. Now, Siakam was a more highly rated kid coming out of high school. I think he was in the Rivals 150. Odusipe is not. Siakam was not an overly skilled kid, but he had a motor and had longer arms, was able to do some things inside and defend pretty well. I don't think he's as advanced as James was, I gather, at this stage of his career, but is that a good comparison in terms of style and maybe body frame, perhaps?
It is, too. What class was Siakam in? What year would that have been?
Oh, goodness. It's probably 12 or 13. I would have to go look it up.
And you have to think, too, that the game has changed even more since then. And we kind of look at today's game and say, well, it's nothing like it was 30 years ago. Well, it's nothing like it was. If it's 2012, it's nothing like it was 8 years ago. You really had to have a presence. And you go on and think about Festus Ezeli and guys like that right around that time frame. Now it's not necessarily like that, especially the way Jerry Stackhouse seems to want to play, with just a lot of the continual ball screens and more of the NBA style. It's going to be a post player involved in the pick and roll. And his coach told me one thing too, his high school coach. He said one thing he can do really well out of that. He said he can ball screen and then get into that high post area and get the pass from the guard and attack from the high post area. He said there's not a post going to be able to keep him in front of him because he's got a really good, real explosive first step and then can finish around the rim. So that may be something they look at too. But I think what your game now consists of with a modern day post player in the year 2020, there's not as much pressure on him to develop around a bucket, but he can show his strengths in different ways out on the floor.
I looked this up while you were talking, David. Siakam was class of 2010 and redshirted that first year. Vanderbilt listed him at 6'7", I think 6'6", maybe 6'5", may have been more like it. So I think that Odusipe is probably taller.
Yes.
But maybe, again, Siakam was a kid with a high motor who made it work in the post because of those things.
Yeah, I'm going to probably cut in between. I think he's probably at least 6'8". I mean, his coach has been around. He's not a newcomer, his high school coach, and he's not a self-promoter either. And he's, in fact, Vanderbilt fans will know this. He coached Doug Roth back at Knox Carnes and who was a center at Tennessee. So that kind of tells you, gosh, he's coached guys that are roughly my age. So, he's been around for a long time. So, like I said, not a self-promoter and all. He says he's legit 6'9". So I would have to guess he's at least 6'8".
Let's look at the roster for a minute, and here are some assumptions we are going to make when we break down the roster for next year. And if you think I'm off on any of these, let me know. This is assuming that Nesmith is not back. I don't think that's a stretch. That Saben Lee's not back. I think right now both of us think that's going to be the case. I would be surprised.
And let me say one thing on that, Chris, if I can, because I don't want there to be questions from our readers. Many people that will read our site will listen to this, and they know that they understand that we have had mixed messages on what our sources have said. Yours have said they don't think he would be back. Mine said he would. And I told you, I called you yesterday and said, Chris, it looks to me like your source was correct, and I'm leaning in that direction. And like I said, mine have said that he would be back up till yesterday, and now it looks like that may not be the case, and you were right all along.
Well, and it's not about that. It's just about being accurate.
Right.
And my stuff had come from a pretty good place for a while. It wasn't a really popular take among the fan base. But anyway, we think that the thing that we're trying to get across is we think that's the situation right now. So we also, I guess, have some questions about McBride, but you think he will be on campus in the fall?
Well, until I hear something different, Chris, I think that's everybody that he's spoken to. I know you've talked to him. I've seen other Vanderbilt media outlets who have spoken to him, and I mean, I've not heard anybody say that he's not going to be here yet. I've heard the same thing for months that he will be, and until he is, there's always that chance until that he couldn't that couldn't happen. But I'm just going with the flow right now. I've not heard anything that said he's not.
Yeah, and I think some of mine was revolving around getting in school and such things. I'm trying to look back and see because I think the other thing too, right, is that I'm trying to remember if Vanderbilt generally gives a press release when a kid has been admitted as a transfer. David, I may have lost you there
And
for a
you'd heard
moment.
the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, now you're one thing you had heard too, and we'd heard the same thing that he was going to come in the summer, and on campus, of course. That's probably going to be online now, and I don't know if they'll be back on campus or not. I mean, it doesn't appear that that's going to happen, but they're going to be online. So, he wasn't. I did think that was kind of weird, though, that he basically transferred from Kansas after 1 week, and it was early fall. And of course, it takes time to make your decision. But it was up later. But that he was not going to come into the summer. I would have to go back and look at the actual commit date. I've got it right here, but I was just. It was curious to me though that he wasn't coming into the summer until the summer. He committed to Vanderbilt on December the 5th. So I thought he might have been able to come in during the winter, and it made sense to me. And then when they said, well, I'll be coming in, but not till the summer, I was just kind of like, So, that is a little bit strange.
Yeah, whatever the situation is, for the purpose of this, we are going to count him on next year's roster. Now, that I guess would mean a red shirt more than likely because of the transfer situation. Is that your understanding?
I don't know yet. I don't know if that's because, he got out of there pretty quickly. So I thought he might have the chance to be ready in the fall because he never played. And I was, even with a transfer, I thought you might be able to look at that as a complete redshirt year because, he didn't play in any games. And, like I said, he got out of there basically as soon as school started. So, that's something we'll have to see. And I've not heard that confirmed, really confirmed, I guess would be the word either way.
Yeah. So I guess anyway, for the purpose of this, what we're going to do is we're going to assume that he's on the next year's roster. We don't know if that's going to happen. We don't know if he'll be eligible. But let's just go through this right now. They have essentially three guys who can play point guard. They have Scottie Pippen Jr. returning. They have Tyron Lawrence, who's kind of a combo guard, but played a lot of point in high school. And then they have, I think McBride is considered more of a point than a two. Is that, if everything breaks down the way we think I guess they will have 3 point guards on the roster, or do you see one of those guys being more of a two?
No, I would agree with that. I know in the last time I was on the show, we talked about it, and Eric Bossy said we had talked about comparisons between Saben Lee and Isaac, or excuse me, not Isaac, but Tyron Lawrence. I'm sorry, and he said that Tyron did have some of Saben in him, but he saw him more of a point guard. But I think he can play that combo. He can play at 1 or 2. He's a bigger guard at 6'4". But I think we would definitely see Pippen and McBride as point guards. And the interesting thing too, they're recruiting Kerwin Walton in the same boat at playing some point and having a ball in his hands. And they don't see him. He's 6'5". He's an elite shooter. But that's kind of been their pitch to him that they hope stood out. That, hey, we don't want to play you off the ball and just have you stand in the corner and shoot threes. We wanted to put it in your hands and work through you. So, and you can do that in today's game. You can go small ball and you can put 3 guys out there at one time under 6'3", 6'4". The year Villanova won a national championship, they started 4 guys under 6'5". You can do that in today's game, but they would certainly have numbers in the backcourt.
Well, here's the odd thing about that, okay? And again, Lawrence is more of a combo, but that would be 3 point guards in the same class. I know McBride is a year before that, but he would be coming in at the same time. I think I've never heard of that. Now, I don't think they're going to get Walton, and you don't either, and we had the questions about McBride. But if it all panned out that way, that would be a very bizarre. I mean, you don't see 2 point guards in the same class for the most part. I remember it happening once. It happened when Kevin Stallings brought in Baldwin and Shelton Mitchell. Mitchell left after a year to go to Clemson. That wasn't so much because of Baldwin as it was, I think, the schoolwork involved. But it's rare that you see 2 in a class. And if Walton did happen, which, again, we don't think it's going to, but that would be odd. That would be 3 in the class.
Well, coaches now like to play more 2 point guards on the floor at the same time. They're definitely not against that in today's game because it's spread out and it's so ball screen oriented. So they'd like to have 2 guys who can break the defense down off the ball screen, and they can go 2 with under 10 seconds left to go on the shot clock. The only other thing I would think of is 2 years ago, John Calipari brought in Ashton Hagans, Emmanuel Quickly, and Quade Green. He had 3 point guards there. Of course, Quade Green turned out to be more of a 2, but he was listed as a point, and Quickly ended up playing 2, and he never really played the point. So they kind of sorted themselves out. So I think when you bring in freshmen, it might be trial by fire, and you get in and you have practice and you start scrimmaging, you get in some early games, and you might say, hey, we thought this guy was a point guard, but he ain't a point guard. And then, unfortunately, you may have a guy or 2 that are neither a point guard or a shooting guard in either case in the college game and are not going to be able to make it. So, you've got things sometimes can play their ways out.
Okay, you go to the wing. They've got, I guess, 4 guys that I would classify as either shooting guards or small forwards. They've got Max Evans, DJ Harvey, Jordan Wright, and Miles Studi. Is that where you would put all 4 of those kids?
Yes, I would. And I would also kind of go with Ty Lawrence there, maybe playing like a Saben Lee spot. So he could go to that shooting spot as well. So, I would say kind of tire and make him a little bit of luxury or either or. DJ Harvey's going to be a bigger wing. Miles Stute's going to be a bigger wing. And then obviously, we'd see Maxwell Evans around playing that too. So, but things are starting to play out now where they'll have a little bit of depth. It looks like they can go 2 deep at each spot, and that's a luxury. God, with all the injuries they've had the last year or 2, just hope you've got enough else to put 5 out on the floor. So, we'll see the quality of it, but that is one advantage that Jerry Stackhouse is starting to look at now that's really not been there the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, it won't be 1, 2, 3 walk-ons on the floor at a lot of portions,
Right.
Especially in conference play. We saw
Right.
that some. Yeah, at power forward and center, Cleavon Brown is back now. Ejike Obinna is back. Dylan Dessou is back. They add Quentin Malora-Brown, the Rice transfer who sat out. And then Odusipe, I would say, is a 4, we would say. So right now that gives them 12 guys. If they don't
right.
get
And
Walton, what do you think they do with that other one? Do they hold it for next year?
yeah, I'm wondering where they could go from here because the only other guy that they've got left, they've got him, they've got William Jeffress, who is going to announce Monday, power forward out of Pittsburgh, out of Erie, Pennsylvania. We all think he's going to go to Pittsburgh, and we talked about COVID-19, and one thing I've noticed is that a lot of these guys are staying home that we thought might go elsewhere. And home for him would be Pitt, and I think that's what most people think would happen. And this is a situation where it really hurt Vanderbilt because he was planning on taking an official visit to Vanderbilt in the spring. And, that never happened, and it looks like he's going to stay home. I don't see where else they would go this late unless some type of transfer fell into their lap. Grad transfers going to Vanderbilt are almost like a unicorn. That doesn't happen. And, if they would have to sit out a year, and that's something they would look for, later on. But I'm really not hearing Vanderbilt right now tied with anybody. So I'm tending to think after we hear from Walton and after Jeffress makes his announcement Monday, that things could get quiet pretty quickly. They could always add somebody, but I don't know of anybody else that they would be looking to bring in.
I'm going to ask you a question. What is your prediction on a starting five to open next year, and what is your prediction on does that change between now and the end of the season? The reason I ask the second question is sometimes you see this often. Kids come in as freshmen, they're not ready to play right away, but they get used to the speed of the game and those other things, and by the end of the year they crack the starting lineup.
Well, I think Pippin's. One other name too that we talked about. I'm sorry, Dylan Cardwell, and I don't need to forget about that one. I just don't think with everything I've been hearing that Vanderbilt, he's going to end up here. I think some things maybe off the floor he's not taking care of the way he should, and I believe honestly that. Akeem Odusipe was kind of a Jerry Stackhouse saying, okay, we're moving on. I just don't think he was going to bring in both of them. Now, moving on from there, to answer your question, I'm going to say Scottie Pippen, and if there's somebody glaring weakness that I look at, or glaring name rather, that I forget, bring that to my mind here. But I'm going to say the obvious ones are Scottie Pippen at the 1, DJ Harvey at the 3, Dylan Dessou at the 4, Cleavon Brown at the 5, and that's not a bad lineup. And looking at that 2, you could go 2 point guards at the same time. I think Tyron Lewis, Max Evans, and Isaac McBride probably fight that out, but I don't know. I think maybe starting out, because he's going to be a senior, he's been here, they know what they're going to get out of him. Maybe looking at Maxwell Evans starting at that 2, but I think maybe as the year goes, if Tyron Lawrence shows some flashes, that he may compete for that spot. So that would be my prediction. Now, if Saben Lee comes back, then it's automatic. It's Pippen, Lee, Harvey, Dessou, and Cleavon Brown, and that is a pretty good starting lineup.
Well, the one wild card to me, or maybe it's 2, is Malora Brown, I think, is more of a low post, probably a 4 or a 5. If he by chance cracks the lineup, do you see Dessou maybe on a wing? Because I believe he played some there last year.
See, now there's the difference right there. I think Dessou, speaking of wild cards, that does give you a variable because he can go out and stretch the floor. he's not a guy to post up, because we're talking about Vanderbilt going 4 to 5 out, and they would definitely go 4 out with Dessou, because he's going to play behind the 3-point line. Now, then if you have, let's say, a Cleavon Brown and Edgertail Bena, or a Quentin Valor Brown, Cleavon kind of gives you the luxury to play the 4 or 5. Of course, Cleavon sets a ball screen, then you're looking at a different look. So I think the thing that might be interesting with this post lineup is that it gives you the option to where you can go with a bigger lineup with some guys in the paint, or you can stretch the floor and go 5 out totally, because Cleavon's pretty good in the ball screen. I could even see situation, we're talking about all these guards where Dessou could slide down, if they really want to go small and go to a pure 5 out, Dessou could be the biggest guy on the floor. So I think with depth, with versatility, you have some options of how you want to attack.
Well, look, most teams' rotations are 8, 9 guys at the most. You might see a 10th guy play every now and then, but they've already got 12 if you include McBride. And again, we're saying Lee is not coming back is the way we are pursuing this discussion. But that says to me that maybe you see a red shirt from Odusipe and maybe Miles Studi as well, because remember, he's changing roles. I don't think he's going to be a big-time impact scorer, and they're a little crowded on the wing because they've got Evans and Harvey are going to play a lot. Jordan Wright's going to play some. And then, as you say, whatever they do with Tyron Lawrence, and then Dessou potentially fits as a stretch, the floor guy playing somewhere other than the 4 or the 5. So, to me, I look at that and I say, there's a pretty decent chance that 1 or 2, maybe both those guys redshirt.
And it's going to be interesting to see what Jerry Stackhouse's approach is. I'll give you an example. If you pull up, let's say, Greg Gard at Wisconsin, and you go through that roster, and it's just redshirt, 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 redshirt. And that's not always the popular thing, but he gets guys who buy into that and want to develop over the long haul. And I think you and I have agreed on this, that Jerry Stackhouse takes the more developmental approach. He's not a guy who's going to go out and nail a bunch of 5 stars right off the bat, and they're going to be one and dones, and he's going to throw them out there on the floor. Kind of like a Bryce Drew. He kind of turned it over to freshmen, and it backfired. Whereas I think Stackhouse, we may be looking, once he gets numbers. Now, he couldn't do it last year because they just didn't have the depth. But once he has depth, does he attack this as we're going to redshirt guys, we're going to develop, and you look up in 2 years or so and you've got a basketball player? Is that his approach? Obviously, do that with transfers. They have to come in and sit out a year. I think you're wise, if you're Vanderbilt, that you try to get an old roster on the floor to where you've got a lot of 20, 21, 22-year-old guys in the program rather than 18-year-olds. I think that's the best recipe. I know it's tough to do in today's age, but it's not if you can find guys that'll buy into that and accept it. And I'm interested to see if that's what he's pushing for, like you say.
One other thing that is worth discussion, you and I talked about this before the show off air, the way they approach recruiting, and in particular with the geography, seems to be changing as they recruit for 2021 and beyond.
Yes. If you look at their last, 2 things stick out. The first thing is, if you look at their last couple of guys over a stretch that they have offered, Quante Berry is from Cleveland, Tennessee. John Butler Jr. is from the Greenville, South Carolina area. Lucas Taylor, who I just talked to, I will have an article up on him later tonight or tomorrow. Wake Forest, North Carolina. Akeem Odusipe, Knoxville. They've offered 2 kids, Kyle Filipowski and Jon Farrell from New York, or Northeast, rather. They're both from New York. And there's also another player, I believe it's Bruce Thornton Jr., who is Odusipe's teammate at Knox Catholic. So one thing I'm noticing, they're getting away from the West Coast. And we thought that, not second guessing anybody, Chris, but we said when it come in that there were so many offers out in California and Arizona, and we said you just cannot build a program in Nashville, Tennessee, in the Southeastern Conference based on left coast guys. You've got to start working the Southeast. And Stackhouse is going to should have great pull through AAU ties and just his name in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. He ought to be able to work that well. But I've always thought the Virginia, Washington, D.C. area or the Catholic League, all that, so many academic. They pull Miles Studio at Gonzaga. DJ Harvey comes in from DeMatha. I've always said that was an area I would work. And, they've offered a lot of private school guys in Virginia and Maryland, and they're not all top 150 guys either. These are guys that are, they've got offers, but they're not 5 stars. And you feel like legitimately they're going to have a better shot at getting these kind of guys. I just felt like they offered a lot of guys coming in. And I'm not blaming this on anybody. They just had to reach out to guys they were familiar with. And I just think that they offered a lot of guys, and you and me both looked at it and said, there's no way they're going to get this guy. And there was a bunch of them. And, they ended up doing pretty well in this class, bring some guys in. And now I think they start to establish a recruiting identity. I just think it took a while.
Let's go to the mailbag, which is sponsored by Vanderbilt fan Josh Minton, an independent insurance agent operating out of Brentwood who can take care of all your insurance needs. Call Josh today at 615-933-1979. Email him at josh@huinsurance.com. Follow him on Twitter at Joshua Minton HQ or at facebook.com/JD Minton HQ. He is my insurance agent. Give him a try. Tell him you heard about it on the podcast.
I think I've been seeing Josh Minton on television some with these kind of Nashville pulling together with on these coronavirus commercials. Is that right?
I have not noticed it. I've not watched a lot of TV, but that would not surprise me. That's one of his things.
So. I believe I've seen him. I believe I've seen his name flash across the screen a couple times.
I wouldn't surprise. Josh is a really good dude, and again, he is my insurance agent too. I will be giving him a call because we're buying a car, or really a minivan. That's what you do when you have a 6 and 8 year old. That's how life rolls these days. But anyway,
sounds like you might need some insurance on some home damage with the kids. Having Monday Night Raws all week long.
If my son had 5 more minutes to throw a fit, he might have today. I think the quarantine is starting to test the sanity of the Lee children. But anyway, had delayed the start of the show a little bit. But let's see. 5-Star Door asked several questions. I believe we've answered a few of these already, but I will start with a couple that we didn't exactly get into. He wants to know which freshmen will have an impact and what do the newcomers need to focus on improving in order to make an impact.
I'll answer the second one first. I think we've kind of already addressed that, and I'll go back because that'll make it a little bit easier. Just doing what the coaches tell you is how they can make that impact on what they need to do and how they can make that impact because, they're going to be developed. So I think that's the big thing. If I look at players who can make an impact, if I had to pick one out of the 3, I think it's going to be Tyron Lawrence right off the bat. I think of the 3, he's probably the one right now who is pretty safe in his role, who can play to his strengths. And like we said, Miles Stute is trying to go from the 4 to the 3. And Odusipe, he may be better than any of us know. I mean, I don't know, but he seems like he's in a developmental role in that stage as well. So I think Tyron Lawrence, like I said a while ago, I think Tyron Lawrence could be in a place before the year's out next year that he cracks starting lineup.
This one also from 5-Star.org. Can you give any insights about what capital improvements Vanderbilt needs to make for basketball?
I would, that one kind of better than I do, Chris. I just think it's across the board. Even going back and talking to Bryce Drew's staff, they were really open about it behind the scenes on what they would like to see happen. And I think offices, weight rooms, locker rooms, inside to the gymnasium, just all kinds of different things done. I just think there's practice facilities. I just think there's a lot across the board, and you can't do it all at once, but I think there's a lot to mention. It's just not one thing, Chris. Like I said, you've talked about that forever, just across the board of athletics. There's a lot of things that need to be addressed.
Yeah, I feel like we could go and find a podcast from 3 or 4 years ago and just take the same question and the same answer and splice it into this podcast, and absolutely nothing would have changed. It's just 4 years later now, and everybody else has done stuff where they haven't.
Yeah, I don't think that. And it's like you said the last time I was on, they were talking about the interim athletic director was talking about some things they wanted to do, and now you basically got budget freezes. So, that's just going to tie it down again. And one sad thing too is it seems like the common response that I've heard, whether it be on Twitter, whether it be here on the site's message board, is, they said, here's another one where they're promising what they're going to do to build facilities. I'll believe it when I see it.
If they put the time and effort into actually doing stuff as opposed to providing excuses or telling us, hold on, they might have the Taj Mahal of basketball facilities.
Like I tell the kids at school, if you did as much work, if you spend as much time working as you did trying to get out of it, and you'd be a student, right?
I feel like some people at Vandy might have taken the wrong calling, and maybe they should have gone into politics instead of higher ed.
Well, and that makes it tougher in this league because the Southeastern Conference this in facilities, it's an arms race. And I mean, you can go just about every campus in the SEC, and it looks like a Las Vegas Strip. And I don't say that in jest. I hate to bring this up because I grew up in East Tennessee, and when my mom and dad were still alive, they lived about 40 miles on the other side of Knoxville. And I remember, probably, 2013, 14. I'd not been on that campus in 10 years. And just, I want to see what it looks like. I've heard about guys talking about all these facilities, and drove around Nayland Drive, then at Thompson Bowling, and you stop there at the red light, you're going to take a left and turn up the hill. And I'm like, good. You could see it from there. I'm like, good gracious. This don't even look like the same place. And I can imagine what it's like now. And, you take your Auburn and Ole Miss have built brand new gymnasiums since then. And I know going to Ole Miss 2 years ago, I went to a game down there, and it's really, I'll give you a visual. Their new arena from Warwick Park was on the right side of the road, and the old Bad Pad was on the left side of the road, and it looked like a housing project, next to Green Hills or somewhere, and it was just a totally different. It was just a totally different setup, man. I said, they're going to leave that old one up to say, hey, this is what we're doing, or if not, I'd firebomb the other place because it looked like an old high school about 70 years old.
Wonders says, will the staff go after Sky Clark now that he is transferring to Brentwood Academy?
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that. His brother ZZ, that was the first offer. So, there's no doubt that that's going to happen. They're already in time. I know this I can say it now, but when they took the visit to Vanderbilt, ZZ was offered and Sky saw it. They were up looking for a house at that time, moving from California to Brentwood. They had already worked out during the weekend with Jamal Richardson. You can see some pictures of that. You just Google it, you can see it. So, they had already made plans about moving. This is not something that just lets in. And like I said, they were able to go by and see Vanderbilt with that. So, you're waiting on when are the next really good players to come out of the Nashville area, and it's in that 2022 class, and Scott Clark will headline that. So I would expect Jerry Stackhouse to see a lot of Brentwood Academy games here in the next few years.
Last thing, and this is just something from me, Jeff Goodman came out last week at the stadium with his top 50 teams for next year. The SEC for next year, according to his forecast, looks a lot like Big Ten Light for this year, where a lot of really good teams, but not maybe any great ones. Although Michigan State would have been considered great, certainly, by people. But the way that it played out, the Big Ten was very competitive from top to bottom. Anyway, here was his top 50 for next year, and I'll get your comments and thoughts on this and maybe where you agree and disagree, but here's where he went. 18 Alabama, 20 Tennessee, 21 Florida, 24 Kentucky, 28 Arkansas, 34 Auburn, 43 LSU, 49 South Carolina, and 50 Ole Miss. That is basically 6 NCAA teams, probably an LSU team that might be on the bubble depending on who wins conference championships and things like that, and then South Carolina and Ole Miss would be NIT teams in that range. Your thoughts on what Jeff Goodman came up with?
The only thing I would disagree with is I would have Tennessee and Florida way up that list. I think Tennessee is looking next year. Now, of course, Eves Pons did declare for the draft this weekend, but I could see them back where they were 2 years ago when they made a serious run and with Grant Williams and Admiral Schofield and that bunch. They've got 3 starters back now. They have Pons leaving, and they've got some transfers in. They've got a top 10 recruiting class. I think I'd put them preseason top 10. I'd put Florida right there. Now, I did see today that Andrew Nembhard is putting his name in. Now, that doesn't mean either one of these guys are going to leave, but Florida had a lot of guys coming back too, and I felt like they underachieved last year. They did underachieve, and I feel like with everything they've got coming back, if they could get it right, they could be that kind of team. Now, that's a big if, because they should have got it right last year. We thought they were going to be that kind of team, and they never did. They just looked to me like they never had an identity. But Alabama, they're still adding players. They've done a tremendous job in the spring of getting some top 150 guys, but really nailing this transfer market. And they've restocked. But Alabama's the same way. I didn't think – I wasn't impressed by Nate Oates' coaching job the first year. I thought they had an NBA backcourt, and I don't know. It didn't look to me like they were going to get the tournament. And they were making a late run to try to do it. They struggled for a large part of the year. I thought Auburn thought they were, but Greg Brown didn't work out. Obviously, Jalen Green didn't work out, two big-time recruits, and they did add some guys, J.T. Thor, but nothing like they thought they were going to get. But saying all that, I just think it is going to be a very good league. And I looked at the Vanderbilt roster, and I said, well, you look by what was in the league last year, because I thought the SEC was down. And I said, you look by that, I think Vanderbilt could maybe win 7 or 8 games in the SEC this year, but it's going to be compared to next year, and it's going to make it tough because I think everybody else was just kind of waiting to kind of reload. So I do agree with that. I think the SEC is going to be – you're going to go from a 3 or 4 bid league to maybe 8 to 10.
Kentucky is a really strange situation because Kentucky, I believe, loses 6 of its top 7 players. That's not new, but I don't think they reload at the level they usually do. Kentucky at 24, what are your thoughts on that? Because it seems like there's downside below that potentially.
I think, but there could be some upside too. I think there's a lot of variables there, Chris. I think the big thing is that they don't have a center right now. And, E.J. Montgomery left. They knew Richards would. I think they really got caught off guard when E.J. Montgomery left. Johnny Juzang was supposed to be back, first guy off the bench. So the only guy that they've got back that got any playing time whatsoever last year was Keon Brooks. So you've got that, and then you've got some freshmen. I don't know that they've got one grand transfer in, Davion Mintz. It's a point guard from Creighton. I don't know that how much he's going to bring to the table. So they're really young next year. They thought they were going to get Matt Harms. So the hope, and obviously he went to BYU. The question is going to be, can they get a solid 5, Nick? Because if they don't, then they are really, really young. Now they've got 2 outstanding wings, B.J. Boston and Terrence Clark, that are going to be in the mold of Malik Monk and De'Aaron Fox. 2 of the best guards, and they're both 6'7" to 6'8" range. But the thing is, how good are they going to be around them? They've got some, obviously everybody they get's top 50. So if Isaiah Jackson could really come on the post, and I think he could, it kind of changed things around. They're going to be young at the point guard spot, but it's really going to come down. They add a 5, and I don't know where you look this late. Of course, there's stuff going all the time. People are transferring out. You'll hear some guy reclassify. You'll hear some guy like McClure Maker said he was going to go pro. Now he comes out yesterday and says he's not. He's looking to play college, and Kentucky's in his top 4. And, you get somebody like that, maybe changes things. But losing Matt Harms was a blow. And losing E.J. Montgomery was a blow. And it's really weird with all the bigs, the Anthony Davises, the other guys that they have had in the post that have had big-time NBA careers. John Calipari just cannot land a post player. He has done nothing but whiff the last 2 or 3 recruiting cycles. That's one of the most interesting things in college basketball to me, that he cannot get a big – he can get all kind of guards, but right now he cannot get a big to come to Kentucky.
Well, I guess I misspoke a little bit. They reloaded with the number 1 class, but Jeff Goodman knows his stuff. It seems to me if they are 24 at that class, there's some expectation that maybe those kids aren't as ready to contribute right away as some of Calipari's past recruiting classes might have been, because that team always is reloading year in and year out and is still top 5 regardless.
Yeah, they I think one thing too, like I said, they don't have a legit 5. And I think here's the thing too. You're kind of asking a coach to change his stripes if they don't get anybody big, because you're going to have to go small. And I think it's kind of like for example, you take Arkansas. You remember when Brett Bielema was out there, and it's kind of like taking Brett Bielema at Arkansas and saying, okay, we don't have any linemen, we don't have any running backs, but we got a bunch of wide receivers. So here's what we're going to do: we're going to spread it out, and we're just going to throw it all over the yard, and we're going to look like, gosh, I don't know, LSU or somebody did last year, when all you've ever done is run it 70 times a game and throw it 5 times. So you're really kind of asking John Calipari if they have to go small to change the stripes and do something he's really not ever done.
Well, and here's one more issue with the SEC, okay? The recruiting classes coming in are pretty darn good. You've got Kentucky at 1, according to Rivals. All this according to Rivals, by the way. Tennessee at 5, LSU at 6, Arkansas at 9, Auburn at 10, so that's half the top 10. Then it goes Alabama at 24, Georgia at 27, Florida at 28, so that's 8 of the top 28. Then it is Mississippi State at 47, so that's 9. A&M at 51, that's 10 in the top 51. Ole Miss at 52, that's 11, and then Vanderbilt at 54 is 12th in the league.
You're bringing in, number one, you're bringing in big-time coach. I shouldn't say number one. I don't even think the deal bringing in big-time coaches is necessarily the end-all. I go back to the SEC Network. I go back to that meeting in the SEC meetings down in Destin that they had a couple of years ago. It was before Greg Sankey. Who was the SEC commissioner before Greg Sankey, Chris?
Before Greg Sankey, it was, good grief, I can sit here and picture him.
Well, anyway, they had a meeting, and this was right before they started the SEC Network, and he had the ADs all together, and he said, look, men's basketball is going to start to be a huge deal because of the SEC Network. Every game that's played in the SEC is going to be seen nationally. And the product that we're putting on the floor right now it ain't going to cut it. We have got to invest in these basketball programs. There's got to be more than football. And obviously you can just see the reward from what the SEC Network pays out to each school. And it was kind of a dressing down, and the ADs took it seriously. And, you start to bring in a Rick Barnes and a Frank Martin and a Musselman and Bruce Pearls gets back into the action, and Ben Howland and Kermit Davis. And, these are all big-name coaches, and they're building facilities. Like we said, it's an arms race. And, used to – it was Kentucky, that they were going to invest in basketball, and a lot of these other schools weren't. But as you go through and look at facilities now, and you look at what Tennessee's got and Arkansas's got, and like we said, Auburn and Ole Miss build new ones, Florida just built a brand new practice facility, and you just see a lot of these places now, their dedication to it, and you're like, they can match Kentucky with facilities, and they can look and say, hey, we're just as dedicated to it as they are, and you may not, and you're not going to have to go through all the fan scrutiny. So, and all the pressure and the fishbowl. So, I think, obviously, it's a pretty good set. There's a lot of good settings in the Southeastern Conference for high school players if they want to play on the big stage.
Mike Slive. I don't know why that was so hard to remember. I could picture the guy's face,
yes.
But I could not remember his name for the life of me. Probably the best one the league ever had. But, David, yes. I think we've exhausted the list of topics we had scheduled for today. Any closing thoughts as we end the show?
No, I've enjoyed it. I love doing these. I love on the message boards all the time. I love reading questions. I love the interaction on the boards. Ask all that anytime. It's something that I really enjoy, and obviously thankful for the opportunity with you, Chris. You've been good to me over the years, and look forward to keep doing it.
Well, you have been great for us as well. Tell folks where they can follow you on Twitter.
It'll be Coach David Sisk at Twitter. And we're going to have a lot of stuff coming up. Like I said, they're one of their most recent offers in the 2021 class. Some of these guys I've just spoken with, so I'm going to have stories on those. The young man, trying to think of his name, I've got so much going on, Lucas Taylor, and I'll have that story coming up either tonight or tomorrow. And a lot of these guys now, after, like I said, after the Kerwin Walton's decision and Williams Jeffers, I think you start looking ahead maybe a little bit to some of these classes. And I'm really going to start hitting up some interviews with players and coaches and a lot of these 2021 and 22 guys that have been offered in the past few weeks. So, I like I said, I really want to hit it up with them.
Thank you for joining us today, David.
Thank you, Chris.
He is David Sisk. I'm Chris Lee. We thank you for listening to the Vandy Sports Podcast.